Good day, students. You are welcome to LDS lecture series. I'll be taking you through a quick tour on the SS4 capital market and portfolio theory. This video is for section of 4, concept of risk. Do enjoy me as we go through this video. Introduction. Investment have two sides like any other coin. One side represents the earning of returns, and the other side embodies the risk and dangers of not realizing our investment expectations. In essence, we cannot consider return without also looking at the risk. The chance that the actual return from an investment may differ from what is expected. Learning outcome for study session 4. After you might have studied this session, you should be able to explain the concept of risk. You should be able to discuss the source of risk. And finally, you should be able to explain event risk and its components. The concept of risk. Risk can be defined as a chance that the actual outcome from an investment will differ from the expected outcome. Obviously, the most investors are concerned that the actual outcome will be less than the expected outcome. The more variable the possible outcome that can occur, the greater the risk. Risk is associated with the dispersion in the likely outcome, and dispersion refers to variability. So the total risk of investment can be measured with such common absolute measure used in statistics, such as variance and standard deviation. Variance. Variance can be calculated as a potential deviation of each possible investment rate of return from the expected rate of return. Variance is a measure of dispersion of a set of data points around their mean value. In other words, variance is a mathematical expectation of the average square deviation from the mean. It is computed by finding the probability weighted average of square deviations from the expected value. Variance measures the variability from an average mean or volatility. Let's look at the following example of variance. Assume that an analyst writes a report on a company and based on the research assign the following probability to next year sales. From this example, we have scenario, we have probability, and we have sales. From the scenario, we have, so now to calculate the expected value, we have this to be equals to, we multiply the probability by the sales. We have 0.1 multiplied by 16 plus 0.3 multiplied by 15 plus 0.3 multiplied by 14 plus 0.3 multiplied by 13. If you sum this thing together, you have 0.2 naira. This is the expected value. So now what we want to calculate is variance, and from our formula we have variance, which is the square of standard deviation, is equal to summation of I ranging from 1 to n. Then we have the probability value multiplied by the expected rate of return minus expected value all squared. So now the first scenario, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have the probability, we have the sales. So to calculate the variance, we have the deviation from the mean, and we have their squared. For the first scenario, we have 16 minus 14.2, which is the expected value, which is equal to 1.8. If you scale it, we have 3.24. Then the second scenario, we have 15 minus the expected value, which is 14.2, which is equal to 0.8. When you scale it, we have 0.64. So then the third scenario, we have 14 minus the expected value, which is 14.2, which is equal to 0.2. When you scale it, we have 0.04. Then the last scenario, we have 13 minus 14.2, which is equal to minus 1.2. When you scale it, we have 1.44. So the variance which is the square of standard deviation will now be equals to the probability value, which is 0.1 multiplied by the squared of all the scenarios, which is 3.24 plus 0.3 second scenario multiplied by 0.64 plus third scenario, which is 0.3 multiplied by 0.04 plus fourth scenario, which is 0.3 times 1.44. So we have 0.96, which is our variance. Our variance is equal to 0.96. So when you want to get your standard deviation, this is very simple. Just do mathematical expression. We have standard deviation, variance to be equal to 0.96, and our standard deviation will now be square root of 0.96, which is equal to, so the standard deviation is 0.98. So standard, if you look at the calculation of standard deviation, you discover that this standard deviation is the measure of dispersion of a set of data from its mean. The more spread apart the data, the higher the standard deviation. Standard deviation is calculated as the square root of variance as calculated above. Risk and uncertainty. A decision maker is said to be under risk when he does not have complete information about the problem situation, but the probability of occurrence of certain events can be quantified. The term risk is used to describe an option where the outcome is not known with certainty in advance, but the probability of its occurring ranging from 0 to 1. This is shown as 0 less than P of X, that is the probability of X, which is less than 1. This means that the probability of occurrence of event X is greater than 0, but not up to 1. A decision is said to be under uncertainty when it does not have full knowledge of the problem situation and it cannot even quantify the probability of occurrence of critical elements in the problem situation. The term is used when the future outcome cannot be predicted from the knowledge of past and existing events, so that no probability estimates are available. In an uncertainty situation, the decision maker is in complete darkness as to the likelihood of occurrence of the events. Source of risk. The risk associated with certain investment instruments may result from a combination of a variety of possible sources. A prudent investors consider how the major source of risk might affect potential investment instruments. Of course, currency exchange rates should also be considered when investing internationally. We have the sources to include the business risk, financial risk, purchasing power risk, interest rate risk, liquidity risk, market risk, and finally tax risk. Business risk. In general, business risk is concerned with the degree of uncertainty associated with the earnings of an investment and the ability of that investment to pay interest, principal, dividends, and any other returns owed by investors. For example, a business firm may experience poor earnings and as a result fails to pay investors fully. In this stage, business owner may receive no return even if earnings are not adequate to meet obligation. Financial risk. The degree of uncertainty payment attributable to the mix of debt and equity used to finance a firm or property is financial risk. The larger the proportion of debt used to finance a firm or property, the greater its financial risk. Debt financing obligates the firms to make interest payments as well as to repay the debt, thus increasing the firm's risk. We have the purchasing power risk. The chance that changing price levels within economy, that is inflation or deflation, will adversely affect investment returns in purchasing power risk. Specifically, this risk is the chance that generally rising price, that is the inflation, will reduce purchasing power. That is the amount of a given commodity that can be purchased with naira value. Then the next one is interest rate risk. Securities are especially affected by interest rate risk. This is particularly true for those securities that offer purchasers a fixed periodic return. Interest rate risk is the chance that changes in interest rates will adversely affect the value of a security. The interest rates changes themselves result from changes in the general relationship between the supply of and demand for money. As interest rate changes, the prices of many securities fluctuate. They decrease with increasing interest rate and increase with decreasing interest rate. Then we have liquidity risk. Liquidity risk is the risk of not being able to liquidate an investment conveniently and at a reasonable price. The liquidity of a given investment instrument is an important consideration for an investor. In general, investment instruments traded in a thin market where demand and supply are small tends to be less liquid than those traded in a broad market. Tax risk, which is the final part of it, the chance that the federal government will make unfavorable changes in tax law, driving down the after-tax returns and market value of certain investments. The greater the chance that such changes will drive down the after-tax returns and market values of certain investments, the greater the tax risk. Event risk. Event risk implies the risk that comes from a large or totally unexpected event that has a significant and unusually immediate effect on the underlying value of an investment. This risk occurs when something happens to a company or property that has a sudden and substantial impact on its financial condition. Event risk goes beyond business and financial risk. It does not necessarily mean the company or market is doing so poorly. Instead, it involves a large unexpected event that has a significant and usually immediate effect on the underlying value of an investment. Event risk can take many forms and can affect all types of investment instruments. We have the component of risk. The risk of an investment consists of two components. We have diversifiable risk and we have non-diversifiable risk. Diversifiable risk, sometimes called unsystematic risk, result from uncontrollable or random events such as labor strikes, lawsuits, and regulatory actions. Such risk affects various investment vehicles instruments differently. It represents a portion of an investment risk that can be eliminated through diversification. It is caused by events such as quality of management, location, dependence on limited markets, nature of the product. It's also known as avoidable risk. Then non-diversifiable risk, also called systematic risk, is attributed to forces such as war, inflation, and political events that affect all investments and therefore are not unique to a given instrument. The sum of non-diversifiable risk and diversifiable risk is called total risk. Non-diversifiable risk is caused by events such as inflation, economic problems, political problems, war, death of the president. This risk is also known as unavoidable risk. We have come to the end of this study session. Hope to see you next class for study session 5, where we'll be discussing the security of investments in stock. Thank you for listening.